Good evening. This is Hanifa with Kingswife Talk Podcast. This evening we do have a special guest where we'll be going over raising children with autism. Just to start off with some information, you know, I always study facts and I always study statistics and things like that, but there is nothing like having an actual person like we have our guest tonight, Miss Minister Tuesday Williams Bankston, who's going to go over with us her experience and how she's raising a son with autism. The first thing I want to say is that me learning that 1 in 60 children have autism. Now that is something that really was interesting to learn. And not only is it's not a black thing, it's not a white thing. This is a thing that is affecting that happens to children worldwide. And just studying it, I don't even know. It's really me studying it and learning that it's actually considered a disability was just so amazing to me, because like we all know, there's a lot of us don't know, rather. There's 3 different disorders when it comes to autism and things like this. And it's just amazing to really have someone here that we can speak to that can help us go over not just statistic stuff, because we all know about Google, right? And how it's very helpful. I told somebody they can learn how to do give a C-section by just going through YouTube or Google. So it's a lot of technology right now at our fingertips, so we can learn so much. But it's nothing like really having someone who is, you could say, like homegrown in a sense, that can really go over the real ups and downs of disorders like this. So without further ado, just want to go ahead and introduce again Miss Tuesday Williams Bankston. She's also a minister out of Chicago, Illinois. And we'll just go ahead and let her begin to speak. And first, I just want to go over some questions with her first that I have, and I think will be actually helpful for a lot of the listeners out there this evening. So, again, welcome, Tuesday.
Hey, hello, Hanifa. Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. It's an honor. It's an honor to be a guest here today. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, thank you.
No problem. I really appreciate you just making time for us to do this and just to be able to educate others. Now, the questions that I have, you already know I had them written down. And I just wanted to go over some things like, what are some of the things that you first noticed that that your child was different?
Well,
first of all, let us know how old he was when you first started and just how old he is now, just to...
Okay, he was about maybe 15 months when I noticed that things were beginning to be a little delayed in what he had already begun to do. He was talking some, he was very active, and, just doing things that children that age normally would do. Most children at 15, 16 months, they began to speak. So he was saying, words like mama, dada, can I have some more? He was saying little stuff like that. And he is now 29 years old. And he's just as amazing as he was then. He is amazing now. And he's dealing with it day to day.
And you said, how old was he?
He was about 15 months when I noticed that things were beginning to become delayed, where he kind of stopped progressing in speech.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's amazing that you found out at that time because, again, like how I do a lot of research, and your son's African American, correct?
Yes.
And during my study, I had came across a Florida State University researcher found that African American children tended to be diagnosed way later than white children, which resulted in a longer and more intensive intervention.
Okay.
And that caused them to come to the conclusion that the reason why the African American children were being diagnosed, later, is because there was like lack of access to quality care, affordable, culturally competent health care, things like that. Like it's just basically like there's a lack. So nobody was trying to diagnose the African American children.
Well, basically, that there is some truth to that. Because when my son was diagnosed, I was lost. I didn't know what to do with them. There were no programs in place. Well, there were programs, but they were not accessible to the inner city African American people. At the time, my son was born in 1991, so he was diagnosed at the age of 3, which was in 1993. So, 93, 94, he was diagnosed. And it was a scary time for me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. Like now, there's so many resources. You have the internet. There's an autism program in every school here, pretty much in the city of Chicago. But back when he first started school, when he first started early intervention, I didn't know what to do with him. So I had to deal with a lot of trial and error. So to say, he was put in programs that weren't helpful, if you will.
Yeah.
There were people that were in charge of these programs that knew nothing about autism. Some of them hadn't even heard of it.
Wow.
So.
And what year was this? We're
looking at 93, 94. Yeah. So we're talking early 90s because he was born in 91. So it was a really difficult time for me. And yes, you are correct as far as like resources in my community at that time. And I still think that there's a struggle, even in today. There are a lot of resources out here, but all of them are not accessible. So, yeah.
Wow. And upon my research too, have you ever heard of the guy from Mississippi, Donald Gray Triplett?
No.
Okay. He's an American man that was basically known for being the first person diagnosed with autism.
Okay.
And the person that diagnosed him was a Leo Kanner, and he was labeled as case 1 of that.
Okay.
He was born September 8th, 1933, actually.
Wow.
So that was something that was really interesting to learn and find out that the actual first case that they concretely felt was autism was that long ago Tuesday. So how long it's been around, how, like you said, it was new, because even after this first case, it would come and then nobody else would, be diagnosed with that.
Because it didn't have a name. It didn't have a name. It didn't. It was there, but it didn't have a name. Not that I knew of. I mean, I grew up in a very diverse area. I've seen children that were like my son, but autism never came up. That word was never mentioned. It was either you were Down syndrome or you were mentally retarded. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking like in the 70s, 80s. When I grew up, when I saw children like my son, no one was ever labeled with autism. I had never heard of it. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And that's one thing I always remember. I don't know if you remember the Forrest Gump movie.
Yes, absolutely.
And when I first had a conversation with you in reference to Asperger's, one of the syndromes within the autism. What's the 3 of them? Because I know you're familiar.
Well, it's many. It's a vast area,
right?
as
Like
far as autism is concerned. But there are three that I studied in depth, and the three are Asperger, as you mentioned, Asperger. Hyperlexia is what my son was diagnosed with, and then there's savant syndrome. So savant, Asperger, and hyperlexia. Those are three that I totally educated myself on, and the reason why I did that is because my son showed characteristics of all three. So that's why I study those three levels of autism more in depth than others. But again, even these three can be put on the autism spectrum, and it's so wide. It's so vast. You can be dealing with a level of savant, and savant is a syndrome, autistic syndrome, that's very rare, and these people possess a gift or a talent, if you will. A lot of them are very gifted in counting and numbers and artistic abilities and maps or music. And of course, my son plays the piano. He plays by ear, but and he also composes music. So he is on the savant spectrum, as well as hyperlexia. That's a form of autism where these children are fascinated with numbers and colors, and they read at a very early age. My son was reading at 2.
Wow.
So he also, again, he's on the hyperlexia spectrum, and then the Asperger. Okay, these people are more high functioning. Okay, they can talk like you and I. They'll hold a conversation. They can live a normal life, but they lack in social skills. And in order for them to live a functional life, they have to do things in patterns. Everything has to be the same every day. And my son possesses that. He has to do things the same way. Things have to be in order the way that he put them. So he too is on the Asperger spectrum. So autism, it's really a complex issue, but yet it's shallow.
For people that's out there that may be listening, not to cut you off, Tuesday, but for people out there that may be listening, that's why I was going to bring up the movie Forrest Gump, just so people can understand, at least try to understand Asperger's.
Yes.
That's what Forrest Gump was portrayed to have in the movie.
Right.
He was able to function. You remember he was talking, you guys, and he was living as an adult. He was even having sex. So, and conceived a son, remember?
Right.
Like a lady fell in love with him and everything. She was a damsel in distress, able to see past the autism, all that, and fell in love with the Gump. But that's just a good example so people can understand what we mean. Yeah,
the different levels.
Yeah,
and that's a great example of somebody with Asperger's. But another great example of someone with savant syndrome is, have you ever seen the movie Rain Man?
Yes.
Okay, how incredible he was with numbers. He could count. He knew the numbers. He knew the names in phone books. He was just incredibly gifted. But that is a person that's on the savant spectrum. So absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what they was when it comes to that movie Rain Man. I'm glad you just mentioned that. I just pulled that one up, and it said Rain Man is a movie about 2 conditions: autism and savant syndrome. Not all autistic persons are savants. In fact, only 1 in 10 autistic persons have any savant abilities, let alone the pre-diagnosis skills of Raymond Babbitt. That's amazing to know.
Yeah. Like I told you, my son is not only playing the piano since the age of 2, he's composing music. He's arranging music. He taught himself